Indie games are at the heart of the games industry, and often they push our very perception of what a video game can and can't be. I've always been fascinated by those driven by passion to pursue a project in the gaming industry, whether it be to tell a story they want to tell, relive and replicate a lost era of gaming, or just simply create something that they and many others can enjoy. In this episode, I sat down with Philip Hesselbäck to talk all things Axis Mundi, DreadX, Wake Up, and Hellpunk Horror. With that being said, please sit back, relax, and welcome to Indie Insight. Philip, thank you so much for joining me today. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on. I've heard very good things, especially when I was talking to Dan. He said that you're probably one of the nicest people to ever speak to and to work with. So high praise coming from someone like Dan. I wanted to first, I like to ask all the indie developers when I start talking to them as, obviously everyone, regardless of whether they make games or not, kind of has specific games that really kind of influenced them when they were growing up and that kind of have stayed with them to this day. Have you got any sort of particular favorites from your childhood that kind of still influence you today?
Well, I think one of the most influential games during my childhood was probably Return to Castle Wolfenstein. The 2001 remake of the Wolfenstein 3D stuff. I played it numerous times, probably the first time when I was way too young. And still one of my favorites.
And are you a big fan of the newer ones that have come out since then, being developed by id Software, or are you kind of more of a traditionalist when it comes to those sort of titles?
To be honest, I still prefer Return, that one, but it could just be nostalgia. I don't know, but I mean, it's really cool because the newer ones are developed here in Sweden, so I mean that's kind of cool. But still, the original is hard to top.
Yeah, no, it's always interesting when talking about especially games, because when I'm from Ireland, and you never really hear about many games companies developing stuff over here, and whenever someone thinks about gaming, the gaming industry and games being created, the first thought is the US is where all that happens. And I was even just looking up there beforehand because I thought, oh, you're from Sweden, and I know Minecraft. Who doesn't know Minecraft? And I didn't realize for a while then that there's a lot of other fantastically produced games over in Sweden, like Mirror's Edge, Amnesia. I think some of the more recent Battlefield games were also developed in Sweden as well. Is there any sort of games that influenced you, particularly Swedish games that kind of influence you now, or is that kind of just, it doesn't really matter where it comes from?
To be honest, personally, it doesn't really matter that much. I know a lot of people are specific places, I'm going to play Japanese games or play whatever. But to be honest, I'm not really that influenced by wherever they come from. I just good games. But it's still really inspiring to see all the local talent here, and you get to meet them as well on local events and stuff. So it's really cool when you meet someone and they're like, yeah, I worked on that game. It's amazing.
Yeah.
So it's fun to have a really active and talented local scene.
And when you mentioned Castle Wolfenstein and all that, very much a first person perspective, and some of your games quite now, I think particularly I'm thinking of Hellpunk Horror, which is currently still in development, but the demo is fantastic, and it's very much a first person roguelike-esque sort of title. Do you have a specific affinity towards the first person shooter genre? Because I know some of your games like Axis Mundi kind of delve into that a little bit, obviously taking shooting more the camera literal sense, and games like Wake Up are more sort of, I would like to say almost Resident Evil / Twin Peaks inspired. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, that's I think the best explanation for it. So I think those are my two favorite genres to both work in and play, first person games and the static camera angle horror stuff, traditional. So I would love to make another one on a static camera angle, OG Resident Evil kind of style things. But as you said, a lot of my games has a first person shooter angle, and it's probably my favorite genre as well. So as you told about Hellpunk Horror, I just came to think about one of my other favorite games in the genre. That's Condemned. It's for forgot his name, but the game from Monolith, I think it was from 2006 or something.
Mm-hmm.
Also played it probably a bit too young, but it was like, ooh, horror game. And I was like, scared the shit out of me back then. But and Condemned has been super influential
Mm-hmm.
when I made when I've been making this other game we talked about, Hellpunk Horror.
I think
Just all the
if I remember correctly, I think I remember one of the quotes regarding Hellpunk Horror was that it was very much like akin to, I think one of the reviews or whatever described it very much like Condemned in that sense. So did that play a major influence for you, and kind of what were the other sort of, bits of media that you kind of drew on to kind of create this sort of game?
So like Condemned was definitely one of the big inspirations as well. Dark Messiah of Might and Magic,
Mm-hmm.
because of the crazy kick mechanics out there. It's like just creative violence. It's really fun, even though it's really silly. And but I think a lot of my inspirations when I make games in general is not so much other games, but I take a lot of inspiration from like other media as well. Like for example, Axis Mundi that I recently made. Took most of its inspirations from like folklore and photography and some of my other hobbies
Mm-hmm.
beyond like games. And I feel like I'm taking a similar approach to Hellpunk Horror. So even though that's a much more gameplay focused game, as at least as it is right now, I'm still taking a lot of like, especially movie inspirations to that game.
Mm-hmm.
Like his effect heavy stuff, like kind of niche horror movies, but stuff like Italian giallo movies,
Mm-hmm.
or like this more like recent kind of B vibe stuff like Mandy or The Void,
Mm-hmm.
those kind of things.
Yeah.
So I think
Speaking
there's a
of
lot of places to take inspirations from.
Yeah. And speaking of Access Mundi, just a little bit, if I'm correct in saying, I know that a lot of the sort of areas present in Access Mundi are based off actual real life photography. Are they
Yeah.
are they places that you photographed yourself, or are they kind of stuff that you found online? You're like, this would make a great setting for, so this is the game I'm going for.
So I actually photographed most of the stuff myself, or
Mm-hmm.
like all of the photos in game are like photos I took during development. So I took a bunch of like local road trips from near where I live,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of just found interesting places and just, this would be cool in the game. Photographed it, recreated it, and yeah, it's so basically my home area is like really built into the game. Like everything from like the textures on the trees to like the actual locations are pretty much 100% based on local stuff, because I love photography and like urban exploration and that kind of stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
it's been a really fun experience to incorporate that into like video game form.
The actual mall setting that kind of I suppose not maybe describe it as sort of a hub for like each little side quest area. Is that a real place as well, or is that from your own imagination?
So like the layout of the hub is my imagination.
Mm-hmm.
As you might have guessed, it's like a river that flows straight through the mall. It's like kind of a crazy design, but the textures themselves used for like the walls and floor and stuff, that are those are actually sourced from like local malls.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, since it's been like COVID and stuff, you don't want to visit malls too much, but I managed to get up really early in the morning, right when all the malls opened up,
Mm-hmm.
and just walked around and sourced a ton of photos just to get like actual real source photos to use in the game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really surprising that like it's surprising that I don't hear more people sort of doing that. What you're doing now is going around sourcing like real life world. Not that I'm not gonna say assets, because that makes it sound like it's just something to be taken a picture of, but like real life art design and architecture and incorporating that. You never really kind of see that a lot when it comes to games nowadays. Is that something that did somebody ever kind of suggest that idea of going around and creating levels through that sort of lens, or was that just sort of something that you came to of your own conclusion?
I think it was mostly my own conclusion that I came up to it, because like I wanted to make a game that was like so we had a constraint of like 20 days to
Mm-hmm.
make the game, and to like I wanted to make a pretty ambitious and like good game during that period. So I figured using like real world locations and real like photos and stuff as an inspiration to the game would help. I mean, it really did. It didn't just look like let me use textures and inspirations for like locations, but I mean, it was also very inspirational just to like be in that place for real, and then just like it really helped to come up with like the puzzle ideas and the story stuff.
Mm-hmm. Well,
But I
obviously,
think it also,
oh no, you sorry, go on
sorry,
there.
yeah, but I think it also kind of ties into my how much I love Return to Castle Wolfenstein, because that game has some really clear like photographed textures,
Mm-hmm.
and as you look around, I've kind of, I don't know, researched the development of that game, and apparently they took like a trip around Europe and just photographed a lot of old castles and stuff. And I've
Yeah.
actually been to a couple of the places they sourced that game into that game, and it's just kind of cool to see the real world stuff and the game stuff, and kind of
Yeah. No, I always love that sort of style of creation as well, because at least the first place where I kind of encountered that sort of taking real world places and kind of incorporating them into games, and I don't mean sort of in like, obviously you have your big sort of like GTA open world games that kind of base themselves off real life places, but like I think in a more confined area where stuff is so very much incorporated from the setting. So like I think, for example, of the Call of Duty Zombies series, that kind of very much incorporates, like, one of the maps is based in Alcatraz and it's got a load of
yeah,
architecture based on that. There's another, I think, some area in Austria for Der Eisendrache, which is like, I don't know, it's in this snow village and everything, and it's very much tone for tone, piece for piece, and it's really weird then when you kind of see it in real life and you're like, oh, this is like not what I expected it to be, but I can really recognize it through there. So even I think afterwards, even if I was to see stuff from Axis Mundi, I'd be like, oh, that's Axis Mundi. Like, there's nothing that's not anything else, and it's kind of interesting in a sense. And I wish more developers would do stuff like that, because I think it's so interesting. But it's not the first time you've incorporated photos into games. Wake Up has I suppose, a spoiler warning for anyone who hasn't played Wake Up, but the end of
yeah,
Wake Up very much takes the photographic, realism literally, and kind of has real life photos incorporated in, which again I think kind of plays into the sort of Resident Evil style influence. Because the old Resident Evil game, specifically the first one, is very much you're walking on paintings, for the most part. Was am I right in saying that for Wake Up it was a game jam, and the game jam was held there in the place at the end?
correct, yeah. So the game was set inside the castle that you see in the end,
Hmm.
and yes, we basically like lived at the castle and made our games for like 5 days. And I have to say, it was a really strange experience to like go around there, photograph the stuff, then go into the game, and like work nonstop, crunch like all day on the game that's set in real life, and you like walk around there. Is this a game? This is like it really made me feel like losing my mind there for a while.
Mm-hmm. And for that as well, like, when you were doing that game jam, was there a specific theme, or was it just kind of create a horror style game? Did it have to link back to the castle, or was that just something you kind of thought, this would be cool if I did that?
And that was something I just came up with. Like there was a bunch of themes. It was a very very cool game, yeah. I think it will be set next year again, next summer,
Mm-hmm.
in another castle. And like, I'm not sure. It's not in Sweden this time, but it's still a really cool thing, castle game, yeah.
Mm-hmm. With regards to Wake Up, obviously, I think I mentioned already, like, that it definitely draws off some levels of Twin Peaks and Resident Evil. Um, but when you kind of like, I am always blown away by your games, because I don't think that there's a particular game of yours that I played that I haven't enjoyed. I feel like your games are always like the perfect length, as well. Like, they never seem to overstay their welcome. But I have to ask, with regards to Wake Up, at the end of Wake Up, when you go back into the game and you're going up to the sort of the theater's doors, and the three enemy NPCs spawn, I think somebody found that now I'm not sure if this is intentional or not, but if you walk away and you go to a different camera angle and then you circle back around to the door, the NPC spawn again. Was that an intentional design, or was that kind of just some sort of mix up that wasn't really meant to happen, but you said, we'll keep it in?
So first of all, thank you so much for your praise. But the thing that the enemies kind of there are more enemies spawning, that was just like a bug. But I don't like I noticed it and I was like, why not? It's just more enemies, it's just fun. But I noticed some people, and myself included, that you can outrun those enemies and replay the game again, which is kind of a fun thing, I guess. And it kind of ties into the themes as well. But
Mm-hmm.
it's really fun when you make a game and the game starts making itself.
Mm-hmm.
Like you have some themes, you have some ideas, but then when you make the game, it's like, oh, that would be cool, and things just like organically change.
Mm-hmm. And for Wake Up, like obviously, I'm. This is probably a very personal question, but was there any sort of major, like any story theme or anything behind that? Something that influenced you, not gaming wise or gameplay wise, but more so narrative wise, or even was it some look into something else, or was it just kind of a fun little project for you?
To be honest, I think it was a while back, so I don't remember specifically, but I had a pretty clear idea what the story was about actually. But then I intentionally made it extremely abstract and like removed all the details to just make it like dreamlike, and kind of whatever the player feels about it. But I feel there are a couple of themes that I remember specifically incorporating. Like, for example, all the enemies in the game are variations of yourself. So basically, you're your own enemy, kind of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And also, like the quality of the game changes, and there are a couple of puzzles with some narrative themes. But yeah, for that game, I deliberately made it very abstract. And it's something I'd honestly love to do again. And I think I will incorporate some of that into Hellpunk horror as well.
Mm-hmm.
Just that abstract kind of, I guess, Lynchian storytelling.
Yeah, because when I was playing it, first of all, because I went into it completely blind, not knowing that it was a game jam game. And when somebody told me then afterwards, like, yeah, that was made in 5 days. And I was like, what? Like, how was that made in 5 days? That is phenomenal. That'd take me years to make. So I was really blown away by it. I couldn't believe it. And specifically, I think the style as well, the sort of the low poly aesthetic, is something that we see a lot in sort of the retro horror scene now, specifically with indie games. What do you think makes that style so popular for horror?
So to be honest, I think it's like I can think of 3 reasons right now. Like the first most obvious one is that it's easy to make, it takes less time, there's not that much detail that you need to incorporate. The second one I think is that like I think horror like benefits from less details. Like personally, I really um like urban legends and creepypastas and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And like they work because they don't have these specific details, like the names and stuff. It's more like vague descriptions of someone I knew did this, And I think that kind of vagueness kind of benefits horror because it kind of like fear of the unknown is the most primal fear and whatever. So when it comes to like see the details and like your imagination has to fill in, I think I think that benefits horror in a way. And like the low poly aesthetic works in a similar fashion. Like it's like it fuels your imagination in a way. And like thirdly, I think it's just like a lot of nostalgia. Like a lot of the good classics are made like they were made in that way because of technical limitations, and like we want to look back at them.
With regards to sort of the specifically in Wake Up with the sort of the creature variety, one of them kind of like obviously the first one you encounter like is your character walking backwards with some weird sort of mouth coming out of the back foot, but then the one you kind of meet later on is on all fours and has like split head open. Is there some very overt sort of inspiration drawn from Stranger Things in that regard, or was this sort of before that all sort of kicked off?
That was after Stranger Things kicked off. I think I was inspired by that when his head split up. and also some of the exorcist style, walking on
Yeah.
your all
Yeah.
fours.
And so when it came to making Wake Up, obviously there'd be some game influences, but were there any horror films or anything that influenced the creation of that?
Like, to be honest, I was very inspired by Twin Peaks.
Mm-hmm.
I had recently watched the third season for the first time, and I was like blown away, and I couldn't think of anything else. So I just kind of, it was mostly Twin Peaks, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
Twin Peaks, Resident Evil, and some Silent Hill stuff.
Well, obviously, as I mentioned, I at least it definitely shone through anyways if I was able to pick up on it. So at least that's a good start. When it comes to say like, when you're designing a game, is there a specific philosophy that you'll prescribe to when making it, not specifically to the horror trope genre, or just in general when you're creating something? Is there a certain checklist you have of stuff that you know you need to create?
To be honest, I kind of approach every project differently depending on kind of what I want to do and what I want to say.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I tend to, I mean, game design is still like a subset of interaction design. So I tend to think of it kind of theoretically on a gameplay basis.
Mm-hmm.
What interactions can you do? What think in the player's mindset and whatever. But in more of a story direction and art direction, I kind of just, it depends on the project and what I want to say with it.
Mm-hmm.
But as I think back, most of my commercial work has been specifically horror games, pretty much only kind of low poly retro style stuff. But I'd love to make stuff in other genres as well with other styles.
Mm-hmm.
I just kind of happened to end up there.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's a fair assumption, I think, to make that probably DreadX led to a large amount of exposure coming your way.
Yeah.
How did you find that, first of all, like dealing with this big massive influx of a lot of people coming from that collection, and then secondly, how did you first get approached by Ted and the rest of them at DreadX to kind of get involved?
So I think it was really much, to be honest, everything kind of started with Wake Up when I did the game jam thing,
Mm-hmm.
and that gained attraction of some influential horror game people, and I decided to make another horror game, which ended up being Hellpunk Horror.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, that development really snowballed. I worked on it almost 2.5 years now, and it still haven't released. I guess I work best under constraints, 5 days, 20 days, pretty short times. But I've done a lot of social media stuff with Hellpunk Horror, and that gained the attention of David Simansky, who made Dusk. Got some interest in that, and I also decided to submit my trailer from Hellpunk Horror to a DreadX showcase thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the mix between David Simansky being a part of the new DreadX collection and Ted seeing the Hellpunk Horror stuff in the DreadX showcase thing kind of I think I guess they found my work interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm really happy for that, because most of the other DreadX developers are already have pretty big names and a lot of games behind them. But I'm pretty new. I haven't really released anything commercial before this.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a fantastic opportunity for me personally.
Mm-hmm. And how much interaction did you have with the other devs working on The Hunt then? Was there kind of a lot of, I don't know, was there, because obviously I'm in the Discord server for DreadXP, and there's kind of, you have your role for splitting up to different collections, but is there sort of a separate Discord server for everyone that's kind of working on the collection, chatting away, exchanging ideas and whatnot?
So we have all DreadX developers kind of have one central part of the Discord server that we can talk dev stuff on.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, there's been a lot of talking between us during development, showing off each other's things, and getting some feedback and stuff. And for my sake specifically, it's been really helpful, because first of all, I'm not as experienced as a lot of the others. And we also worked in Unity this time, which is my first time in that game engine. So there's been a lot of help, both engine wise and some game design stuff I learned.
Mm-hmm. And how did you find the move over to Unity? Was it very intuitive for you to learn, or did it take a bit of getting used to?
It was very intuitive, thankfully, because I mean, Dreadix asked me to make a game. Like, of course, yeah. I didn't really think about like, could this be hard? Luckily, it wasn't. But yeah. I mean, it's still kind of overwhelming to change engine. So I kind of made the game like with that in mind. Like, let's not make anything really technical or really hard because, well,
Yeah, keep it simple.
yeah, it kind of ended up not simple anyway. But it's better to have a simple idea.
And with regards to sort of when they kind of pitched the theme to you of this sort of first person narrative that would all kind of was going to be interwoven together into one key narrative, was that kind of what did they kind of, what was the reaction when you came back and you were like, I want to make this game where you have a camera and you're taking pictures of ghosts and going back in time and whatnot?
So kind of, to be honest, when I started, there wasn't that much of a like interconnected narrative established. It was like pretty much we were gonna make a first person shooter game with like the theme of hunting. That was pretty much it. Like we had a lot of creative freedom there. So I decided to kind of like personally, I kind of went to my own hobbies and interests. I mean, I kind of like where I live. It's a pretty cool place. I like folklore, photographing, coffee, and ghost stories. So I kind of just incorporated all those things into one pot.
And for them, then, when they heard about this camera thing, what, like, was there kind of like a, oh, okay, or were they like, yeah, go for it, like, or was it a mix of both?
I think it was a mix of both. It was like, of course, it was a kind of different idea. Like the rural Swedish stuff is kind of different, like photographing. But I think everyone kind of just really liked the idea immediately, especially like a lot of the inspirations for the game. Like I specifically noted the game Infra as an influence, which is like a first person puzzle thing that I know David, like Szymanski, really enjoys. And when I noted that as an inspiration, it was like, yeah, go for it. So I think I managed to struck a lot of like chords with the other developers as well, with the inspirations.
Yeah, I think the great thing about the Hunt collection specifically, because I've played the other DreadX collections as well, I'm a big fan of them, but specifically with the Hunt, I think they've really stepped it up a notch. And specifically, I think it's great in the fact that it's 7 key developers, 8 if you count the main narrative as well. And it's like every game, I don't think there's anything that seems remotely similar between each game. Like one has you like is this weird hillbilly, running around shooting mutated chickens. One, yours, Axis Mundi, has you with a camera. House of Unrest, you're a priest with a gun, like, and going around and crucifying people. Like it's a huge like tonal shift, but it all just works in a certain sense as well. Because it all feels like that the universe is so wacky that it all just sort of works anyways. And I remember when I was talking to, because one of the questions that always comes up when people make a really good game for DreadX is, oh my god, are you going to make a bigger game? Are you going to, do a sequel to it or whatever? And, I think for a lot of people, it was kind of told to me straight away that, well, DreadXP owned the rights to that property. So like you'd have to go through them again. But if there's some maybe non-canon follow-up, is there anything you'd want to do in regards to the Axis Mundi universe again, or is it kind of like you're done with that story now and you kind of want to focus on different projects?
To be honest, I'm personally not much for sequels. I kind of want to make new stories, like a clear beginning, middle, and end. But to be honest, with Axis Mundi, I can actually imagine a sequel. But if there would be a sequel, it would really make a tonal shift, really focus on different stuff, and like really twist the idea. Because just making the same thing for photographing ghosts, empathizing and going back in time, it would be kind of more of the same. And I think I've kind of explored that idea to its limit with this game.
I think gameplay wise though, there's a good market for a tonal shift in a series, because I think specifically if we look at DreadX developers like Torpil Duke, Hand of Doom is very much like not even similar to Black Relic, and they're both in the same universe. And there's this really cool sort of interweaving narrative. and they're both really good in their own way. So I think there's definitely something. Specifically, would you like to work with Dreadix again on something like that, or is that something you'd want to do on your own?
Would, to be honest, love to work with Dreadix again. They've been like fantastic, both
Mm-hmm.
like to work with and like just to talk to, and really nice people.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about Hellpunk Horror because, bar the demo and the trailers that you've released, I'm not too caught up on everything that's going on around it so far. Um, what can you kind of tell us about it? It is very much a shift from the games you've done in the past. Obviously, you're a big fan of FPS, but this is kind
Yeah.
of taking it to a new level with the roguelike elements and whatnot. What are the main inspirations around that? Because I think it's very easy for someone to see like this roguelike first person shooter and think, oh, it's like Doom mixed with Hades or whatever. But like
Yeah.
the art design very much isn't like that at all. So what was it kind of for you going into it? What were the main sort of core things you were thinking about?
So to be honest, the core idea for Hellpunk Horror was basically I wanted to make a really short game in like a month or two, like a small free thing on itch or whatever. And the core idea was basically zombies at IKEA. Like that was the prompt. And then I figured, okay, IKEA might be fun, like randomization. Like I'm a big fan of roguelikes myself. I think Eldritch is a really good example of a
Mm-hmm.
first person roguelike. And it kind of just went from there. Like I figured I'll mix Eldritch and like some Condemned melee stuff and just mix them together and see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
And then a kind of big Swedish game podcast decided to like interview me, and I'm like, oh, I need to make this game big because it's in an interview. And it just kind of snowballed from there. It just really went bigger and bigger. And initially it just expanded without a good like intervening idea over it. Like it just kind of expanded by itself. And so it's kind of has gone through several iterations of just brainstorming, adding random stuff because it sounds fun, and then me like
Mm-hmm.
removing stuff and changing them to fit together well. But I think as of the state it's in right now, it's in a much more like stable state. Like since I released the demo last year, I kind of decided to remake the whole thing again, like in a final form, not just random jumble ideas,
Yeah.
and like remaking everything with like good performance in mind, expansion in mind, because I kind of want to expand on the game later, maybe,
Mm-hmm.
and also, well, make it good because, yeah, I guess I'm kind of perfectionist. I guess that's why the game is never released.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of an awkward situation because I set the original release date like 2018 when I started on it. Like it's gonna be a month, and it's like, okay, I can expand it into 2019, and it's like 2020. And I was supposed to release it this spring, but then like I need to join Dreadix. That's so cool. I know there's a lot of personal stuff with like studying and stuff, and now I'm like remaking the whole game. But like there will be an announcement really soon with some cool stuff. So
Yeah.
hopefully I won't keep people too in the dark there.
I look forward to hearing more about it. When you mentioned the IKEA thing, well, first of all, that was the last thing I was expecting to hear, but I think that's amazing. But when I think of like sort of a rogue like IKEA, I'm kind of thinking, I'm not sure if you're aware of the SCP universe, yeah?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I am.
there's the never ending IKEA is like one of those like weird like concoctions of whatever someone thought up of. Was that kind of a back of mind influence, do you think?
I actually didn't know about that one until after I started working on the game. Then I was like, oh no, that idea already exists. But yeah, then I just kind of went with it, and my idea kind of started changing.
Mm-hmm. Um, I have two final questions. One is obviously with when it comes to every developer, indie or not, there's always going to be like this long term goal for maybe either a game you'd like to create or maybe a company you'd like to work for or whatnot. Is there any end goal for you with regards to, or maybe not end goal because that makes it sound like it'd be final, but is there any sort of overarching big goal that you aim for in the future, or are you just kind of seeing where each game takes you?
To be honest, I lean more towards the like second thing you said with just seeing where things take me.
Mm-hmm.
But like my kind of, I don't know if you can call it career as a dev, game dev, is more like I make games because I love making them. I'm not really into like just making them for making the sake. I'm making them because I love games and I want to make something like creative, like express myself with them.
Yeah.
So like an ideal state would be like just letting me making my own fun games and just be creative with them, make new stuff all the time and don't like fall into some sort of specific type.
Mm-hmm.
And like there is this specific game I really want to make one day, like a road trip driving narrative thing that I have in mind, and like I'm still writing the story for it. But yeah, one day when I have the time and the money, I'm gonna make it.
Yeah, well, I think everyone who's ever played one of your games will be looking forward to seeing what you come up with in the future, because I know I mentioned it already, but the games that you create are absolutely phenomenal. Like I can't get over how much, because I've never really specifically for me, I've kind of fallen out of love a lot with big long games that require like 60 hours of dedication towards, and
Yeah, me too.
I always for the most part tend to, specifically with indie, dive into games, because I found with a lot of indie devs, most of the time when they start a game with like this huge level of excitement and they keep that excitement going, but their excitement is so big to the fact that like, no, I need to get this out now so everyone can be as excited as I am. So games
Yeah,
tend to be like 30 minutes to an hour at most, and it's fantastic because you kind of skip all the needless sort of for lack of a better word, bullshit that like comes with a lot of bigger games.
yeah.
And so it's always fantastic to see like something like Wake Up or Axis Mundi, which can be pretty much done in one sitting for the most part. I think Axis Mundi, does it have a prompt at the beginning saying it's intended to be done in one sitting, or am I thinking of one of the other DreadX
It
games?
doesn't have a prompt, but it's still kind of intended.
I think all of the DreadX games kind of have that assumption going into them that you'd sit them in the one sitting. I know for me, particularly when I started with the first DreadX, it took me a few sittings to get through some of the games like Summer Night and all that, because I'm not very good with horror. But outside of that, like, no, I love the stuff you're doing so much, and I can't wait to see what you're doing in the future. And I'll particularly be looking out for Hellpunk Horror, because it's something that drew my attention straight away when I heard about it. And I've one final question, and it's a question I love to ask indie developers because they come out with some of the weirdest and wackiest answers of who they'd like to do it with. If you could work with one other developer, who would it be and what game would you make?
Oh, that's a difficult one. There are so many good developers out there. Like, I have to say, recently I worked with when I worked with David Simonski, who made Dusk. That was like so much fun just to like talk to him, because he's one of my like idols. I looked up to him since I like started making games. I think most of the DreadX developers, to be honest, I could like work with any of them. They're just there've been such a nice dev community there, and it's been really welcoming for me, I think. But yeah, I think I'd rather work with like some cool indie guy instead of like some big name.
And would that game be the road trip game you're envisioning with another dev, or is that something you want to do on your own, or is there a game you think might suit well with, say if you were to do a game with David, what would you pitch to him again, I suppose?
I think it would be something in the vein of like a mix between Axis Mundi and Hellpunk, I guess. Some combat stuff, some urban exploration, some wacky story thing going on. Like preferably historical. A historical setting would be kind of cool. I think, yeah, I think that's it. Yeah, the road trip game I talked about feels like, I'm not sure if there's any dev out there that would want to make it. It's like so wacky. It's like, I don't know, a mix between like Wes Anderson would make a animated Pixar version of E.T. or whatever. It's like a really strange concept.
Yeah.
Like racing and stuff.
And then finally, just for anyone listening, how can they find you on all your socials and all that? And is there any way in which they can support you, whether it be financially or not?
So I'm kind of hard to get hold of. I have a website. I have to update it and index it on Google, because like my web provider removed the website for some reason. It was like a bug with the domain stuff. So my website is kind of hard to find, but my Twitter is at that Snillet. I think you'll find me if you search for like Hellpunk or
I'll have them all in
Galax.
the description as well.
Yeah, good. So I think the best way you can support me right now is probably just like wishlisting Hellpunk Horror, because wishlisting helps a lot.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's absolutely fantastic. And Philip, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. And again, I can't stress enough how much I'm looking forward to your next game. And I wish you all the best in the future, whether it's with your studies or with your games and whatnot. So thank you so much for talking to me today.
Thank you so much, and thanks so much for letting me be a part of this.